And we're live.
Hey everybody, a little
Yep.
early today.
Barely, just barely early. Yeah, the State of Play is going to be happening. Welcome to Sonic Boom Live, where usually Eric and I do a bit of game news commentary. It's been a slow month of game news, all because of what we're going to about to see roll out over the next month. It's like E3 time frame, even though there's no E3, but we're starting to get press events. And what did Sony do to us, Eric?
Sony was jealous of our time slot, so they scheduled their state of play, their summer state of play, on our normal time slot.
Yeah, so we'll be doing a live commentary of the State of Play. If you're following us along, I think in the YouTube channel we have the link to the actual State of Play, so you can hear them. But if you want to listen to our commentary over the whole thing, we'll give you as much insights as we can give. Things to expect from this State of Play is I believe it's been confirmed that there will be PSVR2 details. There will be Horizon Call of the Mountain, which is their the Sony PSVR2 title, exclusive title, I guess. They're gonna show more of that, which they also showed in a previous State of Play. There's going to be third-party announcements. Modern Warfare 2 is one of the games that I think people are expecting to see a lot more of since there's a Sony exclusivity or marketing exclusivity deal with them. Stray's another one that we might hear from.
It looks like it might be
now
going.
it's actually starting. If you guys like our content, please like and subscribe. Let's just start commenting. Ooh, it's a PS5. Oh, March 24th, 2023.
Oh, a little under a year.
Yeah, what could that be? The launch of the PSVR 2? No, I think this is actually called the Mountain?
Or just R, you know.
Yeah, this is kind of strange. With some, Resident Evil 4. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
sure.
the class, and that's the Spain. Well, it's cool as we're seeing the second iteration of Capcom's internal engine, which we first saw in Resident Evil 8. So should be bit more refined on the next gen hardware. It truly is a full remake.
Looks like it.
Yeah.
From my recollection, I haven't played 4 in, what, a decade and a half now?
Yeah, GameCube
Almost
era.
2 decades? I think I had it for the GameCube.
I'm curious as to how much they'll actually do to redesign. Like, if you have to do a graphic overhaul, you're basically rebuilding the game one way or another, like they did with RE2.
Yeah.
But like RE4 is relatively modern, so I'll be curious to see like how much of the engine actually gets pushed in a different direction. Clearly, the controls can be updated, but like how much of the plot? Not using any specifically new techniques there.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a thing where they didn't really see much value to doing it.
Oh, there you go. There's going to be PSVR. I wonder if this whole thing will be PSVR 2 content that were like games that will also have a PSVR 2 component to it.
Be interesting to see what that involves.
Yeah. I gotta shut off subs.
Now let's get a sneak peek at 4 games in development for PlayStation VR2.
Which apparently includes The Village. Resident Evil Village.
Oh, interesting.
Let's take a look at it. Wow,
Is it going to be... Yep.
Oh, there you go. There's
Lady.
you escaped my little brother's idiot game.
What happens if you look away right now?
Let's see.
Yeah, I mean that's this whole thing with these, right? Like with VR, you can sort of just
change what you're
control.
looking at.
What
Yeah,
they might do is they might limit actual full head rotation, so you keep focused on what they want you to keep focused on, like they do in the game.
I feel like when they do that, that's a quick path to feeling sick, though. When the visuals don't follow your mind, your head tracking, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I never played RE7 that had a full VR component, so I'm not sure how they handled that, but I'm sure they're going to use those similar techniques.
Man, blood.
Oh, careful what you wish for, Ethan Winters.
I mean, fidelity-wise, it looks like it's on par. The frame rate looked like it was not performant, but
It's
also
still
an early
to
build.
be
Yeah.
fair. Yeah. My hope is that they fix any of the potential performance issues. It's so important for VR.
Right.
You, of all people, have the audacity to question me? You, who emerged from the putrid waters of the bayou to plunder our righteous gains and cut
It seems like this is a brand new
the
game.
demon in the night.
Maybe, yeah.
What have you done
Oh, or unless this is
of this forsaken city?
I don't know if it is. I was gonna say if it's
You, who have brought
Dying Light.
nothing but chaos.
but it does not look like it's Dying Light. This looks like a totally new game.
When death was swallowing this city whole, it was I.
Yeah, this is sort of what I would expect to see on a VR title. There's like distinct lack of runtime shadows. A lot of texturing is lower quality.
Yeah, exactly.
I should say lower resolution, not quality. But that's all just to make sure that they can hit their fill rate targets, the high resolution that the system requires.
I mean, we know foveated rendering, at least from like Unity's,
Implementation.
yeah, was that like they were saying that they were getting like a 50% speed increase out of foveated rendering, so it's hard to tell exactly.
Right, but it could be 50% increase at like that resolution rendered twice, right? Like it's twice as fast, but it still may not be. You still might have to dial down a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It's possible that the Resident Evil stuff looked really good because from what we saw, it was all taking place within the mansion, or that area of the game, and the draw distance. They have a much better control over the assets that exist in that space. Yeah, that's interesting. No Man's Sky VR is that seems. Yes.
I believe there is a VR version of No Man's Sky though, so now it's like
the first one.
Well,
In VR, I guess it could be like on the PC or something.
not a PS5 version of the PR. This is the Horizon Call of the Mountain,
Yeah.
I asked you a question.
which should give you a good, clear example of what can actually be done since it's an internal team.
Yeah.
Arrows through both of us. You're switching with me.
It's a snap mob. We're not gonna make it.
What's weird is it looks like, well, we'll see. I guess it looks like fixed, but now that you're actually seeing climbing, and I think that was people's fears. That was just gonna be like a, like almost like a theme ride where you're stuck in one spot and you just have to look around.
Yeah.
But this is showing a bit more agency in the characters' movements, which is good to see.
Yeah, the distance stuff they're probably doing with there's a lot of tricks that people pull with that distance stuff. It's kind of sort of grayed, flattened, I should say. I think if you way back in what was it, like the iPhone 4 days, that Epic put together some of the Infinity Blade games, and they looked incredible. But when you actually got to see the projects internally, the amount of fakery they did to get them to look that good was incredible. Like
I guess it's like, how is that any different than any other type of game? It's just like, you work with what you got.
Right, but the amount, that's what I mean, yeah. And here, if you look, the draw distance looks incredible, but I'm guessing that beyond something that's actually fairly straightforward, it's all just sort of 2D billboards that are just
potentially
very, very well done.
I will say though that like the fidelity of this and sort of the interactions that they're showing looks on par with like Half-Life Alyx.
Narrative director
Yeah.
at Guerrilla. I hope you enjoyed your first look at Horizon Call of the Mountain, coming exclusively to PlayStation VR2. We're also happy to announce that a big update to Horizon Forbidden West, including New Game Plus, will be available to download on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 today.
Oh, cool.
No.
Gotta love those announcements.
Yeah, they're like, just by the way,
You can
here's-
download it
here-
now.
Yeah, here's some more additional content for Horizon Forbidden West.
Hey, I'm glad that I just finished the first Horizon because I get all the benefits of the upgraded visuals when I finally get to play it.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what I haven't purchased it yet because I just have too much of a backlog, but
Yep.
I'll get there at some point. Out now. All right, good content update.
For details on this free update, please check out PlayStation Blog. From all of us at Guerrilla, thank you for your continued support.
Yeah, it's interesting with the like. I don't know with the PSVR2 stuff. Like, clearly there's a fidelity boost, especially from the PSVR1, which I mean looked generally worse than what was being rendered on the PS4.
Yeah.
Call of the Wild looks good. Oh, Insomniac and Nixus
Asking for nothing.
and Marvel.
If you want to change the world, you have to be the kind of man who
Alpha
can make
footage.
the hardest decisions. Do you really need two of those?
I think they're just saying it's going to PC because Nixus has generally been one to port to PC, and this doesn't look like it's new content. So yeah, it looks like Spider-Man's coming to PC.
It could be a VR thing.
Push people around like that.
I have a feeling it's a PC release. We'll see.
Glory days.
You're probably right. It would be very difficult to see this game working in VR. At least without significant changes.
Yeah, there you go.
PC,
Coming to PC
there it
August
is.
12th.
Leave your clothes on the kitchen floor?
I'll be curious to see what kind of upgrades they give it, because usually they slot in. They've been doing like.
Well, is it the PS5 remastered version, or was it the original? It looked like the
no,
remastered.
it's
I
probably
think
it's probably the PS5 version, I'd imagine, or at
Yeah,
least
it
with
looked-
the same enhancements.
Yep. It looked like the new Peter model that they used.
Stray looks. Well, there's a PS4 version with the Peter model, so the new Peter model.
They added that to the new one?
They released remastered. I don't
For
know, did they
was it for the
release-
PlayStation Pro? I thought the remastered with the new one was only PS5
I'd have to double check that.
because it included like it was massive upgrades to.
Visual,
Maybe it was
but
just-
I think
yeah.
they gave like a remaster. Well, I don't know. Let's see. Anyway, Stray. We haven't heard seen from this game for a bit now. We're getting to see more gameplay.
It still
looks
looks fun, yeah. Like,
Who doesn't want to play as a cat?
right? Here's a dystopian future. Just be a well-rendered cat.
Is it a dystopian future for cats?
I
maybe?
mean, there's no humans. It's all robots now.
Is that dystopian?
For me. Good. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Depends on who you ask.
Maybe we'll got a release date with this. I'm assuming. Yep. Here we go.
Available today.
July 19th. Okay.
July 19th. That's coming right up.
It's got like a little bit more than a month away.
Yeah.
Still looks great. Like it looks on par with what we've seen all the way from the beginning. The traverse looks a little interesting in the sense that like it doesn't seem to have like free traversal. It's kind of like Zelda or the old Zelda games where jumping was contextual only.
That will get your heart racing.
So like you have to have your cursor like be selected on the thing that you want to jump up to, and then you'll jump.
Yeah, I guess we'll see.
Yeah. What is this? Striking Distance Studios? It's crafting the name of the game.
Maybe it's got a bit of a dark or a Dead Space vibe.
Dead Space / Aliens, yeah.
Callisto the dead moon. Dead,
Zombies.
just like you would have been if I hadn't fished you out of that wreck.
It's Nathan Drake's voice.
You're holding on to right there.
Actually, no, probably not. But
That's your old life.
Doesn't sound like it to me.
no, it sounds more like Joel.
Your new
Oh, wow. What's his name?
is entirely
There's part.
in my hands.
There were moments where it sounded like him.
To give you a chance.
Visually, it looks good. I cannot. I mean, some of this looks like gameplay. Some of it looks like.
It looks a bit like a
pre-rendered.
Doom.
I mean, it looks
Nice.
like someone saw Dead Space, did not know they were remaking it, and said, "We're just going to make
Yeah,
it."
this is
And
what
then's
we're gonna do.
Then found out like EA was in fact going to do it. They're like, "Oh, damn." Looks great though. Like,
It does. It really feels like.
yeah, like they look more like necromorphs, and they look like some other type of alien creature.
Yeah.
This also looks like it's next gen only.
Yeah.
Callisto Protocol. Huh.
All right.
Yeah, it's like Dead Space if they weren't remaking a new one. Or remaking the old one.
It'd be worth checking out. As a fan of Dead Space, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
In the year 2030,
So it looks like what we're seeing now is just like a rollout of third-party games that they want to promote
Yeah.
and may or may not have...
I'm guessing they're holding off their first party stuff until the very end.
Yeah, I think some people were expecting this... that's
Is it a
interesting.
roller skating?
Roller derby action game. I mean, it looks like it
bullet
probably has a
time.
lot of fun control and like...
It's like someone said, you know what? Let's do Tony Hawk meets what?
No, it's like Jet Grind
Unreal
Radio
Tournament?
meets yeah, UT. Now the real question is whether or not Sony's going to have an E3-like presentation, right? We're getting Microsoft's in a couple weeks.
Oh yeah.
We're
You mean
getting-
one where they would theoretically show off like
That will be like their E3 presentation, which presumably shows more of a...
Have they announced something about that?
Yes, they announced it like a month ago that they were gonna in fact have like a E3 like presser. Sony has not shown anything, and now we're in June where like you usually would have your E3 pressers. It's part of the Summer Game Fest, and this is definitely not like an E3 showcase so far. So it's like mostly third-party titles, except for I think Call of the Wild or Call of the Mountain.
Ooh, quick time.
I guess the thing that like I keep getting disappointed by is that very few games look like they're doing anything differently than what would have happened in the PS4 era, with the exception of like higher resolution, more consistent frame rates.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what else there was to add to these things. I mean, you could probably make a game look like that. It would take a very different.
I mean, I
approach
guess
to
on like
modeling, but-
more advanced lighting systems, right? Like you saw like that her shooting the blasts of like colored light,
Yeah,
and you don't see the light reacting as like a dynamic light.
Yeah, sure, that's fair. Like using more real time effects in that space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's probably a factor. Oh, look at that. Some of the characters there weren't casting shadows.
I'd also assume it's cross-gen, right? It's a PS5, PS4 title.
Yeah, and there's a lot of this is going to be based on the engines that are produced. The third party especially are going to be like what is the technology available in the engines and how easy is it to configure some of those effects.
Also, games that appeal to a Japanese marketplace are not going to be targeting PS5 because of how many owners of PS4 there are and how few owners of PS5 there are in Japan right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if you're making a game that's specific to a cultural interest, it's obviously is more interesting to people outside of, or it's interesting to people outside of Japan. But if your core audience is that, like, I don't think you can get away without a cross-gen.
Is this the game where they dump a whole bunch of dinosaurs into the city?
That or Street Fighter, which I think it probably is, given the art style currently and the fact that someone's punching bag.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, it's Street Fighter. Which I think makes sense, given that like Street Fighter's always been a
What was the wait?
It's really hard to tell given this intro.
Oh, yeah, I know. Is it a brawler? Is it a fighter?
No, well, it
Looks
like
like
some sort of
an open
RPG.
world brawler. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's like a. What?
It's be like Street Fighter. Oh yeah, that's Chun-Li. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like some sort of Street Fighter spinoff.
It's like, you know what was people are really liking right now is Breath of the Wild style open world games. This is Street Fighter in that world.
That or Street Fighter plus with single player open world aspects to give it a bit more depth for single player. Right, like this stuff looks like
Yeah.
it's a Street Fighter game.
I wonder who the team is that did this, because whatever the Street Fighter what was it 5 was, they had such that inky style that they had.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was the one that was on the PS3, like the remake, or not the remake, the
I think it started with, was it Street Fighter 4, and they kind of kept it going with 5.
Yeah, 5 kind of dropped the inky style, and it wasn't as quite as pronounced as it was. This seems like it's still doing it.
This has got paint. They've exchanged it for paint. At least that guy, that actor.
It's interesting.
Not actor, excuse me,
I'm more
character.
interested about like what these RPG elements are supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean there you go. It's
6. Yeah.
It's
hard to make. Oh, here we go. Maybe they're going to give us the overview now.
And like I said, this kind of makes sense because PlayStation, the Street Fighter franchise, have always kind of been closely intertwined. It used to be like the preferred console to be played on. It's still a cross-gen game, which again makes sense. But you know, we're into 2023 releases, and we're still not seeing any real exclusives that are exclusive to like next gen. That is. It's a little disappointing. Oh. Okay, so Tunic was released exclusively on Game Pass initially, so it looks like there was some sort of delayed launch onto the PS5 or PS4.
And 4.
Yeah. I played a bit of this at GDC, thinking that I'm like, okay, because the like roguelike aspects of it would be detracting to me, but it wasn't too punishing. It actually played pretty well.
Like when you die?
Yeah, I mean, they had like respawn points that weren't too far from where you'd be, so you might get killed and you may be like struggling to make progress, but not in a way that felt overly punishing. So it felt pretty well balanced. What's the second indie game that's going to make? Oh, here we go.
Oh yeah, excited for this.
I've been waiting to hear more information about this.
Yeah, this is the one where it's sound recordings. You go around
sound recorder and like a beautiful
an ending world. Yeah.
Make it real for people in the future. She asked us about living together.
What's crazy is this game looks like a Miyazaki concept.
Yep. Yeah, it totally does.
But it's a Canadian company who's making it.
When the season turns, what will remain?
A little overdone with the cell shading technique there.
Yeah, there are elements that look like they could be right out of Breath of the Wild.
Right. I'll be curious as to how like the record mechanic actually works into this.
Yeah.
That's yeah, I feel like the cell technique's a bit much.
I think she even figured out what will happen to us when the season ends.
Nice use of color there. Composition's great.
Mm-hmm.
I think the style has updated too a bit since the last time they showed this game off. It looks like it's sort of moved away from like a animation style more to like an illustrator style. Like it looks like something that like an illustration you'd see with modern hardware or modern software, excuse me. I guess we'll get some information about the new Final Fantasy game.
16, yep.
Which last we saw it looked very medieval. Pretty dark compared to other Final Fantasies. So I'll be curious to see how grounded the themes of this game will be, or whether or not it's still going to go like off the rails.
ゲームというエンターテインメントを通じてゲーマーの皆さんが心の底から楽しめる時間を提供していきたいと思ってます。それでは最新のトレーラーをどうぞ。
Yeah.
All right. Very, very vague plot.
Right. It could be the beginning of any game.
Yeah. In a world of tyranny, people must take back their fate. Let's see if this actually makes any sort of sense. Is that Bahamut?
There's going to be another war, isn't there?
Creative business using it 3. They really didn't feel like giving it a better name.
Yeah. It's such an ironic title.
I mean, visually it looks
No,
striking.
Creative Business Unit 3.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
the game?
Yeah, yeah. Clearly it's using a version of what we've seen in Final Fantasies, most
7
recent Final
remake.
Fantasies, like the sort of dynamic real-time system.
Oh, yeah. Gameplay. You're talking about gameplay-wise?
Gameplay-wise, like, yeah, specifically the battle.
Yeah.
It's like a cousin of, or probably like the sister of what they use in Final Fantasy VII Remake.
If I take the field, our duel will shake the island to its foundations.
Again, my issues with these is, right, like, is I feel like they went with like a more Western aesthetic, or you could claim an aesthetic that's more in line with like the original
Souls.
Final Fantasy titles, you know, where it was like more medieval
yeah.
style.
For sure.
The issue I have with this, and in general, a lot of Square's more recent games they're announcing, is like, I still have no idea what this game's about.
Yeah, the problem is they just sprinkle in random voice acted lines.
It is true. Yet for every citizen who falls, another can be bred.
Right, like all you really get from this is like, it's medieval, it's a Final Fantasy, and there seems to be like
Conflict.
summons that are destroying. Yeah, right. These are going through all the different summons.
The music is great, I will say. Like, they literally, the chorus was saying the names as they were coming out.
Yeah, I guess it's like, to me, it's what exactly is it appealing about this game? Like,
It looks like maybe you have the ability to
play as a summon?
Exactly. That's what it seemed like. You can potentially. It's like
I mean, even if it is, right? Like, my biggest issue, right, is that a game's going to ask you to invest whatever, 15 to
40
45 hours, something like that. What exactly is the appeal? At this point, I will not play any game just on the look of the graphics or anything like that. It's what does the game have to offer in terms of story and depth, and Square still misses the mark. Their games may be plenty deep, but their advertising for it just like do not create a compelling story, even if there is one. They just like really skim it and just use random talk lines and graphics to try to show off the game. I feel like it's really missing the point.
It looks like that was it, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. They just while you were talking, the announcer was saying, "And that's it for our current crop of titles," or whatever. It was like,
all right,
like, yeah. Okay.
Sounds a pretty short state of play, I guess. That's a half an hour long.
42 minutes. Maybe. Wait, what time is it now?
No, it's 30 minutes since we're at 4:30
yeah,
right now.
29. Not even a full 30 minutes.
Yeah. So
short one today. I don't know. Let's do a little post show
feedback
chat. Yeah. What was your most the most interesting title that you saw?
I mean, technically, Call of the
across
Mountain,
different.
I think, is the most interesting.
Okay.
Mostly because, okay, so like we haven't been given. Okay, now I got advertisements throwing around. Thanks, YouTube. How about not?
Classic. We can still skip around in the video though and see the old stuff if we want to like check back on things.
Oh, I don't like how this is doing anything it's doing right now. This streaming software is like,
is it being funky?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I guess. Did it just? Are we streaming right now?
Oh, good question. I don't know.
I have to check now. Yeah, it seems we are.
Yep. Except there's like two of me. Oh, there you go. You cleaned it up.
Yeah, it's because the software decided to duplicate it.
Cool.
For funsies. Just to annoy me a little bit. Yeah, so I think the title that was most interesting here was Call of the Mountain, mostly because it's a PS5 exclusive title.
Yep.
It's PSVR2, so it gives us an indication about what the PSVR2 is going to actually be capable of doing. I have a feeling that the way that they're presenting it is not accurate to the way you'll actually see it. If they're using foveated rendering, they're reducing the area where they actually have to render at full quality. So what you'd actually see in a VR situation would probably look drastically different than what we actually see in a trailer. But my guess is it's to what you perceive in the game, you know, with your eyes looking around the screen space, it's probably accurate to what you'd get. It looks good. It looks like it's got some pretty interesting VR interactions and implementation. They showed the pickaxe and you wrapping cord around it to tighten the blade to the handle. So it's got some interesting interactions. Kind of reminds me of Half-Life Alyx. Looks about the same fidelity that we got on Half-Life Alyx, circa 3 years ago.
I feel like Alec was it that short? I feel like it was a while ago.
I feel like it was at least 2 years ago, but I can't remember. I feel like it was 2019.
Yeah, 2020.
2020.
2020. I thought it was before that. Maybe it was just like they had betas or were showing stuff off, and that's what I'm thinking of.
But that was the most interesting thing. We seem to get announcements from RE4, which we knew was in development, but we had not seen footage, so we didn't know what version of or what the remake would look like.
Right.
It's kind of what I expect. We got some third-party announcements, but a lot of them were just like, hey, by the way, they're also going to be on PlayStation. Like,
you mean 4 or?
No, well, no, I mean like in the sense of like the third-party games, the indie titles that were making their way to PlayStation were games that were already available on Xbox at this point in time.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a mix. Like this definitely was not a E3-esque.
No, they definitely held off on a bunch of the announcements. This, I assume, was just we recognize that we haven't really announced anything in a while, so we're just gonna like bridge the gap here.
The weird thing here is like I guess maybe the most interesting thing is God of War Ragnarok is still a no-show. Like we got in their last like big state of play where they showed Wolverine and Spider-Man 2. They showed off actual gameplay of God of War Ragnarok. It's supposed to release this year. We keep getting confirmed that it will release this year, but we do not have a release date, and we have not seen any footage for like over half a year at this point. So I think the last time we got information was October.
Yeah.
So yeah. Weird that it's not there yet.
For me, sort of game-wise, I'm most interested at the Callisto Protocol right now. Not only because it's a game that I'm interested in, just by virtue of it being what looks like a spiritual successor to Dead Space. Yeah, but that it looks technically very interesting. Like they're using a lot of modern techniques for that style of game, and I know that the Dead Space remake is going to do that as well. That's sort of what they were showing off in their last video, but it'll be interesting to see how this compares and what a different team is able to do.
Right.
Striking distance and crafting, apparently.
Right.
What was the other thing? Gameplay wise, I'm interested to see how this turns out. But what was it? The roller dome.
Was that the name of it? It was Roller Dome?
Yeah,
I think I missed the title.
It's called Roller Dome. It's coming out.
It looks interesting. It doesn't look like a story-driven game, but it looks like one that you can tool around and have fun.
Yeah, Roller Dome, August 16th. It looks like, it's someone said, as I said during the stream, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is a great game. We should do something with that. But we need to iterate on it. What else could we add? And they were like,
guns.
What if there were guns? Exactly.
I mean, this is what I like about the indie scene still. Like, even though indie's gotten weird and more competitive, we still see like innovation in gameplay mechanics. But I feel like we get games that we used to get as regular releases on the PS2 era as indie titles for like half the cost.
Yeah.
Right? Like that like Jack Bryan Radio is basically what that is. Not to say like the gameplay and everything else, but it's like that was the amount of game. Like, here's a game that you run around and tag stuff. There's like light story, but basically it's a game that's based around this mechanic of riding around rails, spray painting your tag, and having turf wars.
Yep.
Yeah. Now we get a game like that today, and they're like, well, no, it can't be a full release because it's not a huge budget game, but we can sell it to you for $20 or whatever it's going to be. But like, it's kind of neat that we get that now. We get like sort of the diversity that we lacked in like the PS3 era, now coming out as like indie titles for much less than what we paid even back then.
I gotta say the weirdest one for me was probably Street Fighter 6.
Yeah, that's.
I really don't know what to make of that right now.
Yeah, because like we like go through like this roller coaster. Like, okay, I know we were expecting a Street Fighter 6 gameplay ship footage because they had already announced the game like a month or so ago. It was presumable that they were going to have marketing rights with PlayStation because they've been doing that since I think Street Fighter 4. Yeah. So like it's not surprising they have tournaments that are sponsored by PlayStation, etc. The RPG elements, like as I was watching it, I was like, wait, are they doing like a side Street Fighter RPG? Is this a totally different game? No, it's like all one game that has like 3D roaming around aspects of it. It's very weird.
Yeah, what's interesting is that like at least from the video, it looks like there's a lot of they've sort of de-emphasized the backgrounds. It appears like everything is sort of color-wise washed out a bit.
Yeah.
Whereas the previous backgrounds in some of the games were much brighter and much more vibrant, and well, like more fully realized. And in this one, they've sort of dropped that a bit, which makes it odd because the characters really pop hard. And like there are elements when you watch what looks like gameplay, where the just the contrast within the characters themselves visually is a little much for my eye.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying contrast between foreground and background. I'm saying contrast between the colors that make up one of the foreground characters. Just internally.
Yeah.
It seems a bit rough. But maybe they'll adjust it.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of these titles are 2023 releases, so we've got.
There's a whole bunch of them that are 2022. Like a lot of the indie ones are.
Yeah, indie games like what's it called? Tunic,
yeah.
Because it's already been released. Like it was just waiting its exclusivity time frame to be released on PlayStation. But no, I mean the bigger titles like RE, Final Fantasy, Resident Evil 4. Yeah. Any of the PSVR2 titles looked like they were in 2023.
This season. Well, yeah, that probably depends quite a bit on the PSVR's release.
Yeah, which also seems to indicate that the PSVR 2 may not be a this year release, or if it is, it's a very late.
Very late,
release.
Yeah. Season is autumn this year. The game season.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, indie titles, right? Like indie titles aren't that surprising. It's the bigger, I think, the releases from Capcom and Square. I will say, I'm like, as I was saying while the video was playing, is like I'm just really disappointed in Square's ability to sell their titles.
Yeah,
it's like
it's
the issue that they have with Forspoken, which is like, okay, we get the narrative elements. Like, okay, it's a more novel concept than say Final Fantasy, where it's like a fish out of water story, person from, I guess, like modern, our world jumps into a Final Fantasy setting and has powers and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But every advertisement they have of that, every trailer is like inane clips that don't really establish what the story is, and everybody has to watch these things and put together like, okay, so it's a fish out of water. This person who's comes from a broken family or something, like goes through a portal somehow, ends up in this strange world, has powers that they don't know if they want or even want to help people. And there's like this weird gray matter around this planet that prevents people from leaving, and you're like, okay, story seems a little hard to like grasp. I think that's part of the problem. And then their advertising around it is just sound clips. They've done a bit of a better job with people kind of deciphering what Forspoken is, but even with that, what was it, Final Fantasy? I'm blanking on
Intergrade or whatever it was.
No, not Intergrade. The one that is like a Souls-like brawler.
Yeah, I can't
remember the name, but that was the one where like they just kept repeating one line over.
Oh, is it the Chaos one?
Yeah.
Chaos is here. Chaos is coming.
And, like I think we did a live feedback on that, but you're just like, what the heck? Like, how does this even tell you what it's about or what it is I'm playing? They just instead focus on like the gameplay and the graphics, and in something like Final Fantasy, whatever this one is, like 16,
yeah.
Even like this is like, okay, I know what Final Fantasy is. I know it's going to be summons and magic and adventure RPG.
Yeah.
But like what they frame this whole thing is like, it's medieval and it looks good. You're like, yeah. And like, how is it going to differentiate itself from any other Final Fantasies that we played before? It's just like, I couldn't tell you.
So one of the things that I've come to appreciate about certain animation of late, and I think I'm bringing this up because of how Square Enix puts together its trailers, which is just basically like crazy action, cut, crazy action, cut, crazy action. And when I say crazy action, I mean like the camera is doing this weird zoom in thing or zoom out with explosions and particle effects and special things. And they're like, look how beautiful. And we're like, yeah, but when you do that for the whole trailer, there's nothing but the beautiful, and it just becomes like whatever. What they don't do, like if you remember the original Final Fantasy VII trailer back in like 97 or something like that, it does the establishing shot, right, where it has the camera coming down to Midgard or whatever.
Midgard,
yeah, and gives you the train, and it zooms in, and it does give you some gameplay, and it shows some of the other cinematics, but it has at least the establishing shot. It gives you a sense of the world and the space that you're going to be in before it gives you some of these cuts and way. And like, I don't really get that sensation from any of this. The Final Fantasy VII trailer showed Aeris at some point and just had her standing there, not saying anything, didn't need to. Just the look alone was enough to communicate like curiosity and interest. And there's none of that in trailers these days. They're all just crazy shot, crazy shot.
Not in trailers, like specifically with certain game companies that like fail to really establish what their game's about. Like take Stray for instance, right? Like Stray, the original trailer, like first established, okay, you're a cat walking around. You're like, okay, that's an interesting concept, but can I play a game about a cat for whatever it is, 10 hours?
Sure.
Then it starts walking around like the cyberpunk world. You're like, okay, that's interesting. I guess the setting's interesting. And then you're like, oh, there's no humans. It's robots. And there's going to be here's this threat to you. And they're not saying they're narrating anything. You're not hearing any text, but they managed to establish like what the game is going to be about. You're a cat in a cyberpunkish world where no humans exist anymore. you have a robot companion, and the biggest threat is like these weird little goo things that will attack you, and some of the robots seem menacing. So you're like, okay, like I don't know what the plot is. I don't know why the cat's doing what it does, but at least the setting and general story that you're given is like, okay, I'd be interested in playing this for more. And I'm guessing Stray's not going to be a $70, $80 title. It's going to be priced probably around 40.
Yeah, or less even.
Yeah.
And I would, the same sort of holds for Season, which of course is a slower title in general. The whole point of that is to take your time and capture the now. But one of the things that struck me, I just recently watched through all of the Netflix TV show Arcane, which if you have not seen, Justin, absolutely highly recommend. I was shocked. It is. I've played like maybe 10 minutes of League of Legends.
No, I've heard very good things about that. However, it's
incredible.
Backlogged behind everything else.
That's fair. Please get to it at some point. At any rate, one of the things that they do incredibly well is pacing in the animation, and they will hold a shot. They will establish the shot and then hold it, and it gives you the sense of gravity and depth, which is completely missing. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's one of those things that some of these trailers we've been talking about, Stray does that, and Season does that, and some of the other better trailers will do that. Trailers that just show you a clip and then move on, and show you a clip and move on. And in the case of Square Enix, their trailers tend to be, here's a shot of some pretty graphics, here's another shot of pretty graphics, here's a line of text that has zero anchor into anything, here's another line of here's a spoken word that is just from a random time point in the game. Not the intro necessarily, just a random time point. We just thought that the actor did a great job with delivery, and it has a keyword that we want, so we use that. And it's like, I that doesn't grab me. There's nothing in there that says like this is.
Yeah, it's like the game. The stuff that they show like isn't meant to establish like story or purpose. It's just there to show off like, here's the work that we do. And I don't know if it's like just a lost in translation thing, or if it's the team at there's just like, here's a bunch of footage to a trailer team, like put something together. It's just really unfortunate because, I mean, I don't know what the story is in Final Fantasy 16. I don't know what the story is in Forspoken, but presumably there's a better story in there than what they present.
Hey, I hope. I heard when I was working in Japan back, this is when Final Fantasy 13 was under development. And actually that game came out while I was working in Japan, as in the games industry. So I had friends that worked or were affiliated with Square Enix at the time. And they told me once the game was out that 6 months prior to release, they were still working on figuring out what the story was going to be. They didn't know. They had been building tons of art, just building lots of beautiful art. And like the last 6 months was a march of trying to piece together, taking all those building blocks that they developed and sticking them together into a story. And like eventually when push comes to shove, they're able to do it. But it's possible that they just don't even really have the story fleshed out yet and just don't know. And therefore they're like, well, we have a date, we have to ship it, or because we got to make money and we've spent a bunch of money, and at some point we just have to ship it and get recoup costs. So it's possible that that's where they are. My hope is that they would have learned actually trying to like get a script ready and at least a story mostly molded before they start building. But
yeah, I mean, I guess it's mostly like, I mean, and I guess it shows with a lot of Square Enix is like I don't feel like they have cohesive story, even with Final Fantasy VII, which that will probably get me, a lot of negative comments on it. But Final Fantasy VII did not have a cohesive story, and I think even suffered more than like say Final Fantasy VI did, where the story was kept simple and it was like character focused, whereas Final Fantasy VII had a bit of that, like Vincent and Sid had their own stories, but like,
I mean, that's what I was going to say is that for me, the thing I remember about Final Fantasy VII structurally is disc 1, you're in Midgard, you go through Midgard, that has a story and an arc. It's the story of the space and sort of setting of the world. Once you leave Midgard, there's sort of this overarching goal of figuring out something with the earth energy or whatever. And then you start meeting people and their stories take priority, right? Like, I want to know more about Red 13 and what's going on there. They did
Yeah,
a
but-
less good job than Final Fantasy VI with all of their characters.
And I think
To
it's
my
because like none of their stories are really that fleshed out as they are in like
Sure.
Final Fantasy VI, where you go about trying to conclude the different stories for all 6 of those characters, or for all the characters in Final Fantasy VI, or most of them. Like there's a couple characters that are kind of throwaway, like Zozo, Umaru, even Mog, I think, are kind of throwaway, but other characters have kind of like their own story arc that carry through as you progress through the story. Final Fantasy VII really doesn't have that, even though you end up, I think, going to Red 13's like village and you find out a bit more about him being experimented on. You never get like a full story arc. You never get a full story arc for Kate Sith. You never really get a full story arc for a bunch of them. I think the ones that you get are like Cloud and Tifa, and then
Eris to an extent.
Eris'
her story
kind
sort of
ends.
Cuts off.
Barrett might
All of
also
a
have like
sudden.
a full story. Like you find out about him being a father, but I mean, even by the end, like how does that get concluded? I don't think it really does.
If you do want a story where there is that type of character level progression,
I'm not playing Octopath Traveler.
You got it. That was exactly where I was going. That game is amazing.
It's always where it goes if we talk about Final Fantasy.
It is, because it's like they took sort of the themes and fulfilled the promise of what the games are supposed to be.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So back to the state of play. I think that's sort of for me.
Yeah, it was actually a little bit disappointing. I was expecting a bit more of an announcement. I know that they temper your expectations. So I guess like the real question is when are we going to get like a dedicated God of War state of play where they're just going to do like a long walkthrough with release date?
Yeah.
Usually these happen like they'll release one title and they'll show the next title. So like I guess when they did maybe Gran Turismo or something or Horizon, that when during that release date they would have then shown shortly thereafter like here's God of War. They haven't done that yet. I still don't know when it's going to release. It's probably going to release this year, but like whenever you get the sort of long playthrough of God of War to kind of build up more hype around that game.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of this is like when are we going to get like an E3 like showing like we got in October last year? It doesn't seem like they're going to be doing it for E3. Like I have a feeling that they're just going to completely skip the E3 pressers, not be flooded with the same sort of press space and shoot for October. And I will say that it kind of makes a bit more sense to do it then, because if you do it in October, you can carry the hype through the Christmas season and drive purchases of your console from that hype. And in the summer, kind of forget about it and say, like, look, you're going to get God of War in whatever, October.
I mean, it may make more room for other sort of more indie titles and other things coming out. Try to push, if for Sony, try to push on titles like Season or Stray. Those
plus
kinds of things.
the slew titles that they already released, right? Like we got this year so far: Horizon, Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7,
which today got an update.
Yeah, right. Possibly a PSVR2 sale that they have to deal with this coming Christmas. And then God of War is inevitably going to be released this year. So there are like a handful of really strong titles that they've released this year. Now it's just a matter of like, okay, so when are you going to show us what we can expect after this? Like once God of War is released, we know there's a Wolverine, we know there's a Spider-Man. What else? Like, I'm trying to think if there's any other games that like we don't know about that like, or we know about that we haven't seen anything on.
Yeah, I don't know. I was also going to mention that I did check it up. The PC release of Spider-Man is specifically Spider-Man Remastered. So it will have the...
Yeah, I think the question is whether or not Remastered had made its way onto PS4.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it did. Like, that or was like, maybe I'm just mistaking it for their like Game of the Year edition. No, I think they only have the Game of the Year edition, which is what the remaster is, plus the visual upgrades for PS5. So yeah, it's not surprising that they released the PS5 version of it. I think what will be interesting about that, well, I think there's two things to talk about. One is what kind of upgrades are they going to give it. Usually they do like a Fidelity FX or a DLSS capabilities. Like they did that with they introduced DLSS to I'm blanking on the name of it. The package delivery simulator. The one you played.
Yeah, Death Stranding.
Death Stranding. They added DLSS to that. I think they might have done it for Horizon as well. Then there's they have fidelity effects that they added to God of War, I think. So yeah, they've added some updates to the games that made them give it extra performance and extra visual upgrades on PC. So I'll be curious to see what they do with Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Additionally, it wasn't announced. It wasn't clear that it was coming to PC. So this is like more of the march of PS4 titles or PS5 titles making its way onto PC. There's still like a 2-year delay out of them at a minimum.
For the for which ones?
From a PlayStation title being released on console to being released on PC, there's like a minimum of 2-year delay, with the exception of Death Stranding, which I think was a 1-year delay.
Oh yeah.
But any of the like internal studio titles, like it's at least 2 years.
Yeah.
To get a PC release, so that's kind of been. I'm curious if that spacing is gonna start shrinking.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect it to not. I would expect that what they're going to try to do is maybe if they're shrinking a space, because this doesn't exist yet, it would be the amount of time before they just allow free streaming for the premium tier of their PlayStation Plus. Or sorry, PlayStation Plus Premium.
I mean, but that's cannibalizing sales, right? Like right now, they benefit from having a PS5 release and a PC or PlayStation release and a PC release. I think their best performing game was like 8 million copies, and I think that was Horizon that did the best so far. So like that's another whatever. I think it was something like $65 million they made off of the PC release of Horizon. The benefit of having it get closer is that your marketing budget can be
you don't have to reignite the engine,
right?
And start from scratch again, I should say.
But at the same time, like it gives people less of a reason to have a PS5 if they have a powerful PC,
right?
But maybe that's just like that sort of crossover Microsoft doesn't care about. They're like, if you own an Xbox or if you own a PC, if you own a like high-end PC, you're not going to be buying an Xbox. If you buy an Xbox, it's because you don't have a high-end PC. And maybe PlayStation's seeing the same thing, which is like, if you own a high-end PC, the only thing we're doing is robbing you from being able to own it if you refuse to buy a PS5. And maybe high-end PC owners willing to put whatever $5,000 into a rig are not willing to then again spend like another $500 on a console. So I wonder what kind of business information they have concerning that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's all speculation from me at that point.
Yeah, I'll just be curious to see if that window starts closing, like whether or not we'll see like with God of War say 2, like whether or not it'll be less than a year from the time God of War 2 or God of War Ragnarok gets released to the time we see it on PC.
Right.
Like all the titles we've seen so far, games that had released on PS5 or PS4, and we weren't seeing releases on it on PC. That's like an initiative that it started like 2 years ago. So, okay, 2 years ago, and now they're kind of backfilling all the games that they haven't released on PC. Mm-hmm. But, at some point we're going to catch up to the point where, okay, now God of War is released. How long is it going to take between God of War Ragnarok and God of War Ragnarok PC? Or even like Forbidden West and seeing Forbidden West drop on PC. Anyways.
Time will tell. Yeah.
All right. Well,
cool.
You seem pretty disengaged at this point, so
I mean, I feel like we're starting to beat the dead horse with a stick.
Okay.
On the PC stuff. I mean, there's nothing that we can say except speculation. So
yeah.
I'm like, all right.
Well, I guess that's
Yeah.
the show for now. We rounded out in an hour. If you're catching this live, we'll have the video on YouTube at youtube.com/SonicBloomTV. You can find our videos there. If you like what you see, like and subscribe. It helps us out. Guess we'll see you again next week at 6 p.m. when we usually broadcast. 6 p.m. Eastern time.
Hopefully we'll have some juicy things to talk about by then.
We'll see. Sony cycle.